Episode 291, Unwanted Advice. I was in a hurry to go to the bathroom, so I hung up, Jade said. Dario didn't say anything, and Jade didn't know what else to say, so they both fell into an awkward silence. Jade thought for a moment that Dario had disconnected the call. I wonder if he suspects that I lied to him, she thought worriedly. He would be mortified if he knew what Bruce had just done, and he would probably blame himself for not being here to protect me, she thought. I can't always rely on him to save me every time I get into trouble. It's not fair on him. Jade tried to make her voice sound as cheerful as possible. Dario, have you eaten yet? She asked. Yes, he replied. Was there any reason that you called me? She asked, wondering if there was something wrong. I just missed you, he said. His words melted her heart, and she smiled but didn't reply. Dario seemed dissatisfied with her lack of response, and he returned to his usual domineering tone. Tell me, how many times have you missed me today? She knew that he wanted her to tell him that she had thought of him 100 times, but she wasn't in the mood for his games, so she changed the subject. Have you been busy today? Have you returned to Washington? I'm in New York, he replied. Why did he return to New York? She thought. What is it that keeps drawing him back there? Just as she was about to ask him, she saw someone walking toward her. Jade's expression changed and she whispered into her phone. There's something I have to do right now. I'll call you later. And she ended the call. She put her phone back into her bag just as Rosie walked up to her. Rosie stood in front of her and looked Jade up and down, as if she was inspecting her. Jade returned her gaze. Rosie was wearing a lot of makeup. Jade got the impression that she had sought her out. What are you doing here, Jade? Are you hiding away talking to a lover? Rosie asked, with a self-satisfied, lewd grin. Do I need to report to you about whom I'm speaking to on the phone? Jade replied lightly, as she started to walk past her toward the party. Where did you go just now, Jade? Are you having an affair? I think I saw you with a man, she said suggestively. Did you see it with your own eyes? Or was it just a piece of gossip that you picked up? Jade asked, pretending to be calm. She wasn't worried about her reputation, but she knew that Rosie would be quick to spread any rumors about her if she got the opportunity, and she didn't want to cause Dario any worry. Rosie looked at her disdainfully. I was just joking with you. Why are you taking it so seriously? Maybe you really are having an affair, she said. Her expression was difficult to read, and Jade couldn't decide whether she had seen her with Clive or not. Then it dawned on her that there hadn't been anyone in the corridor when they'd been speaking, so she couldn't have seen them together. If you have the spare time to meddle in other people's business, Jade said assertively, why don't you use that time a little more productively? She's not as easy to bully as she used to be, Rosie thought sullenly. Her confidence has grown a lot. Even so, I don't know how Jade managed to get to be a star so quickly. She doesn't deserve it. Let me give you some advice, Jade. You think that you're so great just because you're the female lead now, but it might not always be like that. So I suggest that you don't get too used to your new lifestyle, she said contemptuously, and she stormed off back to the party. After the party had finished, Jade was led away to begin filming the movie. It had been a busy day for her, and she was surprised that they would start so soon. Dario sat expressionlessly in Evelyn's room in the New York hospital. Sharon, his mum, had requested that he visit Evelyn after she'd been contacted by her family, and he had reluctantly agreed when he heard that Evelyn might attempt to commit suicide again unless he came to see her. Dario's grandfather, Walter, had also taken a turn for the worse, and he wanted to see his beloved grandson. Dario had visited his grandpa before going to visit Evelyn. The doctors had been unable to persuade Evelyn to eat anything, and they had ended up sedating her. Dario was resentful at having to be there. He felt some responsibility for Evelyn's condition, since he was the reason that she had attempted to take her own life, and he also felt pressured by the family connections. But he wasn't happy about having to spend his time sitting in a hospital room. Although Evelyn wasn't a member of the Harper family by blood, she had lived with them since she was young, and they had treated her as one of their own. As a result, she'd had a multitude of family visitors all wanting her to get better. Episode 292. Honesty is the best policy. Evelyn woke up just after midnight. Where's Dario? I want to see Dario, she shouted at the top of her lungs. David had accompanied Dario to the hospital in the knowledge that Monica would be there. When Evelyn called out and seeing that Dario wasn't responding, he went to her side to calm her down. Don't worry, Evelyn, Dario is here. Look, he's sitting over there. As he spoke, he reached out and touched Dario's face, as if to illustrate that he wasn't a figment of her imagination. He was slightly surprised and also pleased that Dario didn't hit him in response. When Evelyn saw Dario's handsome face, she stared intently at him. Her anxiety turned into excitement, and she smiled broadly. "Is it really him?" she thought. "I hope I'm not dreaming." "Dario, are you really here? I missed you so much. Can you come closer to me?" she said as if in a dream. Her eyes filled with tears of joy at the surprise that he had come to visit her. Dario had sat motionless. He hadn't said a word since she had awoken. David pushed him forward and said, "He's been here since early in the morning, but you were fast asleep. He's been waiting by your bed for you to wake up. He hasn't even eaten since we arrived." "Really? I can't believe that this is actually true. Dario, I've been dreaming about you in my sleep, but every time I wake up, you're not there, and it makes me not want to wake up. Tell me, is this a dream now or is it real?" she asked as she reached out to take his hand. Dario moved his hand away, dodging her touch. "Of course it's real," David replied. Evelyn cried with happiness as she looked at Dario's familiar face. She recalled what it was like when they had been young. She had always wanted to be close to him, and as they grew up, her feelings for him increased. She had waited for him to notice her, but he had never looked at her in the same way that she saw him. She had always held out hope that if she worked hard, he would eventually fall in love with her. Dario frowned, pushed David gently to one side, and stood beside Evelyn's bed. He looked at her with a sympathetic smile and said in a deep voice, "I think that you should know why I'm here." Evelyn's smile disappeared, and she felt dread at what he would say next. She suspected from his tone that he was going to tell her that he couldn't be with her, but she also thought that his reason was not that he didn't want to be with her, but because he couldn't be with her. She had refused to eat or receive any medical treatment until he came to see her, which in turn had resulted in her family putting pressure on Dario to come and visit. "I would risk anything to be with him," Evelyn thought, "even death. But what's the point in him being here if his heart isn't here?" She took a deep breath, her throat tightened, and tears started flowing down her face. "Dario, why? Why did you do this to me? I've loved you for so long. Why can't you love me back?" she asked. Dario returned her gaze and said, "Why do you have to torture yourself like this, Evelyn? I don't want to lie to you. I'm not going to change my mind. When you wake up in the morning, take good care of yourself and stop messing around." He had waited until midnight to explain things to her, and after saying what he needed to say, he turned and left the room. Evelyn looked at him with a deep sadness in her heart as he walked out of the door. She began to sob uncontrollably and started to remove the needle that was attached to her wrist in her attempt to follow him, but David stopped her. She lay on the bed feeling powerless and shouted after him, "Why, Dario? Why won't you be with me?" Dario continued walking and didn't answer. "I would rather die than live without him," she thought. She looked bedraggled and humbled. David sighed. He respected Dario's decision, but he also felt sorry for Evelyn, and he wished that he could help her. He knew how it felt to love someone who didn't feel the same way, and he was determined to offer her some comfort. "Evelyn, don't cry, give up. Dario did this for your own good. It's good that you've finally woken up. Don't get too distressed. Your family has been so worried about you," he said kindly. Evelyn buried her head in her knees and rocked back and forth crying. As Dario left the ward, Evelyn's grandma, Hilda, spotted him and walked over. She'd been a successful businesswoman before she retired and was well respected in the family. Although Evelyn wasn't her biological granddaughter, they had always been close, and she had a soft spot for her. "Dario, how is Evelyn doing?" she asked worriedly. "Hello, Grandma," he replied respectfully. "She's awake now. You can go and see her. I have something to do now, so I have to leave." She had been happy to see Dario, but when she heard that he was leaving, her expression turned into a frown, and she held out her walking stick to block his way. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "Where do you want to go? That's more important than being here. Now that Evelyn has finally woken up, you should stay with her." Dario's face remained expressionless. He faced an inner battle between respect for his grandmother and his need to move on with his life. "Grandma, I have something important to do. She has plenty of people to look after her, and I am just her cousin. I don't think that I need to spend the whole night with her," he said in an attempt to explain that he didn't want a romantic relationship with her, and that the idea of them being childhood sweethearts was not the way that he saw things. Episode 293, Men Are All the Same. Dario had never been romantically interested in Evelyn. He had only ever thought of her as his cousin. "Nonsense," his grandmother said forcefully. "Evelyn has a big problem right now. Surely that's more important than anything else." David heard them speaking and walked out to the corridor to greet Hilda. He winked at Dario while he gently ushered her into the room. "Hilda, come in quickly. Evelyn said that she wants to see you. Dario is very busy with work and he's already missed some important meetings to come here to visit Evelyn," David said, exaggerating. She allowed herself to be led into the hospital room, keen to see Evelyn finally awake, while Dario slipped away into the night. She arrived at Evelyn's bed to find that her eyes were red and that she'd been crying. Evelyn's parents, Rex and Pam, were now by her side, trying to reason with her that everything would be fine. Hilda began to cry when she saw how distraught her granddaughter was. "Was Dario mean to you? Don't cry. I hate to see you so upset," Hilda said while she patted her hand and wiped the tears away from her cheeks. Evelyn raised her face and looked at Hilda through red and swollen eyes. She forced herself to calm down and cry. "No, Grandma, Dario wasn't mean to me," Evelyn said, not wanting her to think badly of him. "If he wasn't mean to you, then why are you crying?" Hilda asked. "I don't care how powerful the foster family is. I won't let anyone hurt my granddaughter." She turned to Rex and spoke angrily. "What are you doing to protect your daughter? I told you that Evelyn and the foster boy should have gotten married as soon as possible so that I would have a great-grandson, but you didn't listen, did you? How long do you think I've got? I've already got one foot in the grave and you still haven't arranged the marriage." Evelyn heard what Hilda said and began weeping again. "Grandma, don't say any more. Dario won't agree to marry me anyway," she said in despair. But Hilda wasn't used to giving up when she wanted something to happen. "How could it be? The two of you grew up together. How could he not like you? Why would he rush over to visit you in the hospital if he didn't have feelings for you?" she asked triumphantly. "Don't worry, Evelyn. Grandma will think of a way to make everything all right." Rex frowned as he listened to his mum's domineering words. "Mum?" he exclaimed exacerbatedly. She turned her head toward him with a fierce expression and poked him with her walking stick. "Don't you mum me. Look at the state your daughter is in. If anything happens to her, you'll have to answer to me. When I took her in and looked after her, she was a happy girl. Now look at her since you came along and got involved. You're just like your father." Rex hadn't told Hilda about Evelyn's attempted suicide as he didn't want to worry her. Instead, he had told her that Evelyn had suffered an accident and fallen down the stairs. Hilda had brought Evelyn up as a child, so she believed that she had both a responsibility to look after her and a right to express her opinions without restraint. She felt resentful at her son for not taking better care of Evelyn, and this was not the first time that she had gotten angry with him for not being there for her as a father. Evelyn felt bad that her father was getting the blame, and she spoke up in his defense. "Grandma, please stop blaming Dad. It's really not his fault." "I know what I'm talking about," Hilda protested. "These men are all the same. They're all useless." Dario left the hospital just before 1 o'clock in the morning, and he insisted on taking his private jet to Los Angeles without stopping to rest. Jade had had a very busy day. The film crew and actors had worked until after midnight. As it had been the first day, everyone had been willing to put in the effort, and there hadn't been many complaints. The opening ceremony had been a success, and there was a general feeling of excitement, a sense that they were working on a film that was going to be a hit. Dario sat on the plane working on his laptop. He had a lot to catch up on, but Lucas came over with a serious expression, holding Dario's tablet computer in his hand. Lucas had been busy reading messages to ensure he didn't miss out on any information. Looking at Lucas's troubled expression, Dario asked in a deep voice, "What's the problem?" Lucas looked hesitatingly at his boss, reluctant to show him what he had found. Dario sensed his reluctance and unceremoniously snatched the tablet from his hand. In his email tab for work was a picture that had just been downloaded. It showed a photo of Jade. Although the picture quality was bad and the background was very dark, he could clearly see his wife lying on the floor with Bruce on top of her. Dario's dark eyes had a murderous look as he studied the image. He threw the tablet against the wall of the plane where the screen cracked. "Mr. Foster, I think that this is a setup," Lucas said, aware that Bruce was not someone to be trusted. Dario glanced at him with a cold expression, and Lucas instantly realized that Dario had already made that assumption. He's not angry with Jade, he thought. He's angry that someone has tried to set her up again. Judging from the quality of the picture, it appeared to be from a surveillance camera. It had been zoomed into Jade's face, and although it was very blurry, it was undeniably her. Episode 294, Hidden Bruises. Whoever sent the photo is obviously trying to come between me and Jade, Dario thought. But I've had people try that trick before. It didn't work then, and it's not going to work now. Whoever it is has underestimated my feelings for my wife. I doubt that Amelia would be brave enough to try something like this right now, so who was it? He wondered. Tell the captain to speed up, Dario ordered, his gaze fixed on the broken tablet. Yes, Mr. Foster, Lucas replied. And find out who sent this, Dario added shortly. Lucas went to another section of the plane and took out his laptop. At the Los Angeles film studio, Jade hadn't finished filming until 2 o'clock in the morning. Her elaborate costume had been awkward to wear. It had needed constant readjusting, and the director had made the actors repeat scenes over and over until things were just as he wanted them to be. Jade felt exhausted. She had just removed her makeup and was getting ready to extricate herself from her costume when she sensed someone entering her trailer. She turned around and was delighted to see that Dario was standing in front of her. Her tired eyes lit up in surprise to see him appear in the middle of the night. His chiseled features appeared even more handsome than usual in the soft light of the trailer. He seemed to be slightly disturbed, although he looked at her with genuine love and affection. She ran over to him and buried her face into his muscular chest. "What are you doing here, Dario?" she asked. "I thought you were in New York." Dario stepped back and looked appreciatively at her costume. It was as if he was looking at a lady from a long time ago. Her dark hair flowed elegantly down her shoulders. "She's so beautiful," he thought. "Let's get changed," he suggested. "Okay," Jade replied, nodding, and she walked through to the changing room section of the trailer. Dario followed her in and she said, "Dario, I want to get changed. Why are you following me?" "I'm going to help you," he said simply. "I don't need any help," she asserted, and put her hand on his chest to redirect him out of the room. But Dario confidently walked in behind her, closed the door, and locked it. "I suppose the costume is rather complicated," she said, resigning herself to his presence. "Maybe I could do with some help." As soon as she was freed from the confines of her dress, Dario pushed her gently against the wall and leaned against her. Jade blushed at his obvious intent. "Dario, what are you doing? I need to get into my normal clothes," she protested. "I'll help you change afterward," he replied suggestively. Jade was suddenly conscious of the bruises on her back from when Bruce had thrown her to the floor, and she angled her body to prevent Dario from seeing them. Dario lowered his head and placed one hand on her face to guide her toward his lips. But just as he was about to kiss her, Jade pushed him away with both hands and said, "Not tonight, Dario. You go out and I'll be changed soon." He allowed himself to be ushered out of the room and sighed helplessly. Jade's back was sensitive and tender to the touch, but she endured the pain stoically as she changed into her normal clothes. She opened the door, ready to ask Dario where he would be staying the night, when he scooped her up in his arms like a princess. "Dario!" she exclaimed. "What if someone sees us?" Jade felt sad that she had not been able to tell anyone about their marriage, and she hoped that they would soon be able to tell the world and be together openly rather than keep their relationship a secret. Dario lowered his head and kissed her sensually on the lips. His eyes were full of tenderness. He seemed to read her mind and said, "Don't worry, no one will see us." "How can you be so sure?" she asked. As he carried her out of the changing room, she realized that he was right. The film crew that moments earlier had been busy packing things away had all left, and only Caroline and Violet remained. "Where did they all go?" she asked. "They've all finished work for the day," Dario replied simply. "How did they all leave so suddenly?" she wondered. "Where are we going now?" she asked. "To the airport," Dario replied. "Oh, I see," said Violet. Jade saw her assistant staring at her and felt embarrassed. She leaned into Dario and whispered in his ear, "Hold me down now." But Dario held her even more tightly and carried her to a stretch limousine that had been specially prepared and furnished for her. It was almost as luxurious as those used by the A-list actors. Jade's eyes widened in disbelief as Dario carried her inside. Episode 295, Star Treatment. Violet stood off to the side and stared ahead blankly. She couldn't help being envious, especially when she saw how decisive Dario was when he carried Jade out. When he placed Jade in the limousine, Violet finally couldn't hold it in anymore. "Wow, Jade's man is simply too handsome, right, Caroline? And he's so authoritative. Why does the crew clear out when he tells them to?" Her eyes were full of admiration and disbelief. Caroline didn't know what he had said to the director, only that they had immediately been cleared to leave. It was like a plot in a television drama. She shot Violet a quick glance and said seriously, "Speak less and do more." "Sorry, Caroline, I understand. I won't ask any more questions," Violet said, but she still couldn't suppress her curiosity. "Hurry up and bring everything over," Caroline told her. "We should go now. Tomorrow morning we'll be in New York." The following day would be Jade's final endorsement for Adele Barracu's new product, Phantom Mascara. She needed to attend a grand ceremony to cut the ribbon for them. Violet and Caroline got into the back seat of the limousine as Dario was fastening his wife's seatbelt. Jade could tell what Violet was thinking when she saw her snickering. She blushed and whispered to Dario, "Can I ask you not to do something?" She wanted to ask him not to carry her in front of Violet again, but Dario seemed to have anticipated her request because he said simply, "No." He pinched her chin and, in sight of the two women behind them, kissed her deeply. Looking at her tired eyes, he couldn't help but feel a pang in his heart. It was after 2 a.m. and she hadn't rested all day. It seemed that he had to find a way to reduce her workload. They arrived at the small airport in Los Angeles, where the luxurious private plane was waiting for them. Jade was not as excited as when she had seen it for the first time. She was about to get out of the car when Dario said, "Don't move." He quickly walked around to the front passenger seat and carefully lifted her out. Jade was too tired to resist, so she decided to give in and simply let him carry her. When they got to the bedroom on the plane, Dario placed her on the bed. After that, he handed her a thermos and instructed, "Drink all of it." "What is it?" Jade looked at him inquiringly, but Dario didn't answer. He let her see for herself. Jade opened the lid and found that it contained her favorite soup. She tasted it and could tell it was Dario's cooking. She couldn't help feeling a little surprised. He'd been so busy that day flying back and forth, yet he'd still found the time to prepare soup for her. It was simply inconceivable, and she was moved by his thoughtfulness. "But how did you know I was hungry?" Jade asked, raising her head and looking at him sweetly. The bowl of soup was as warm as her husband's heart. Because he cared about her health, Dario had specifically selected all the ingredients and prepared it for her. He stretched out a finger and bopped her on the nose. "Because you haven't eaten much all day, you must be starved." Jade blinked and asked, "How do you know that I haven't eaten enough today?" The director had taken them to the hotel for lunch and dinner, but because of the stress and excitement of the first day of filming, she'd lost her appetite and had eaten very little. "Oh, I know. Caroline must have told you," she said. Dario didn't answer. He just looked at her with a smile and carefully prepared a tissue. After she finished eating, he leaned forward to wipe her mouth. His actions were so gentle that Jade's heart almost melted. "Take a rest. Take a bath before you sleep. I'm afraid you'll be sleeping on the plane again today," Dario said. Jade nodded and gave him the thermos. He took it to the sink and washed it. Her heart swelled as she watched him. He was so tall, so handsome, and so gentle. She was afraid that she would lose him someday. Jade read her script for a while, until Dario again urged her to take a bath. When she walked into the bathroom, she saw that he had already filled the tub for her. He had added rose petals, essential oils, and bubble bath to the water. The smell was fragrant, and it made her relax as soon as she stepped in. She was just getting settled when Dario walked in. He began to strip in front of her, revealing strong muscles and naked flesh. Jade's face turned red, and she immediately submerged herself under the water, only her nose and eyes sticking out. The foam hid her entire body from view. Out of the corner of her eye, she secretly glanced at his toned torso. She didn't dare let her eyes wander any farther south. "Heavens, Dario, what are you doing?" she asked, averting her gaze. "I'm taking a bath, obviously. Water on an aeroplane is very precious," Dario said righteously. "Then why did you waste so much water on me?" "Don't you want to share?" he asked. Dario stepped into the tub and settled down at the other end. Fortunately, it was big enough for 2 people. The water splashed up the sides but didn't spill onto the floor. Episode 296, A Room Full of Secrets. Jade felt shy in the tub with him, but Dario always managed to take her even further outside her comfort zone. He pulled her into his arms. Under the water, their bodies were tightly pressed together. Jade could clearly feel his skin all along her back. Because of her period, the two of them had not had such intimate contact for a long time. Their breathing sped up, and the atmosphere in the confined space became charged. Dario narrowed his eyes and pressed his face against hers. He felt her body temperature rise because of the effect he was having on her. His lower abdomen tightened and his throat became dry. Only in front of Jade would he lose control like this. If not for the fact that he knew she still had her period, he wouldn't have been able to contain himself. Right there, right then, he wanted her badly. But he held back his desire, hugged her smooth body, and kissed her hard. Only then did he ease up a little. Jade was afraid that he would find out about the injury on her back. She kept trying to evade him and didn't dare to be overly intimate. She was also a bit shy about sitting naked in the bath with him. Dario started caressing her shoulders. When his touch moved to her back and he hit the spot where her bruises were, she couldn't help but groan. She resisted the pain and gently took his hand away. She lowered her head again, not wanting him to see her expression. "What's wrong?" he asked nervously. Jade lowered her eyes and pretended to be shy. She deliberately said, "No, it's nothing. Stop touching me." Dario knew she was shy, so he didn't think much of it. He didn't push her anymore, but quickly left the bathroom. Jade quietly sunk into the water and soaked for a while. She was a little dizzy and wanted to sleep. Soon, she followed him out of the bathroom. But in the bedroom, she discovered an embarrassing thing. She didn't have any pajamas. Her suitcase was still with Violet, who had forgotten to give it to her. She decided to put her dirty clothes back on for the time being, but they were gone. She guessed that Dario had taken them to be washed. She looked around and found only a face cloth. There was not even a towel. Dario suddenly opened the door and came in. Jade jumped in fright. She was afraid that he would discover the bruising on her back, so she stood facing him with an awkward posture. She was shocked and quickly held up the face cloth to cover her chest. Then she thought about it and moved it to cover her lower body, putting her arm across her breasts. Her bashfulness made her even more charming. Dario, who was wearing a bathrobe, glanced at her indifferently. He handed her a snow-white robe, and Jade immediately retreated to the bathroom to put it on. Just as she was about to come out, the sound of him drinking water came from the bedroom. She raised her eyebrows. He seemed to be drinking ice water again. Although she really wanted to remind him that it wasn't good for him, she didn't dare say it out loud. When she returned from the bathroom, Dario was lying on the bed and only said lightly, "Let's go to sleep." She turned off the lights. The two of them lay together, listening to each other breathing. Jade tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Although Dario had his eyes closed, Jade could sense he was also awake. She was worried that he seemed a little off. Could something have happened? In the past, he would have been holding her close. He was very quiet, and his expression was somewhat solemn. Was something wrong with him? She moved to embrace him and leaned against his chest, quietly listening to his heartbeat. His heart was beating fast as usual. She reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. Through the dim light, she stared at him closely. After a long time, she tentatively asked, "Dario, did something happen in New York?" She only knew that he had a friend who was hospitalized there, but she didn't know who it was. She was worried, but Dario answered, "No, everything's okay." Then he pulled her closer and held her tightly in his arms. After a long time, he asked seriously, "Tell me, did anything happen today?" Her heart rate sped up. She couldn't help but think about what had happened between her and Bruce. A trace of anger flashed across her eyes. When she thought of that scumbag, her stomach was full of bile. She hadn't expected that after such a long time, he would still pester her. But she quickly regained her composure and calmed her voice because she didn't want Dario to worry. What could have happened? We were all very busy today. The opening ceremony in the morning, and then in the afternoon there were photos and promotional videos. Dario interrupted her coldly. "Jade, this is not what I want to know about." Jade lifted her head and asked doubtfully, "Then what do you want to know?" Could it be that he knows something was wrong? She wondered. "I just want to know what exactly happened," Dario said with a heavy tone. "I told you I was busy today. That's what happened." Jade still pretended to be calm. Dario reached out his hand and touched her cheek. He pursed his lips. After a long time, he spat out a name like a curse. Episode 297. A Guilty Conscience. Bruce Stevens. When Jade heard Dario say that name, she was shocked. She grasped the sheet tightly and looked at him in a panic. "How did you know?" If he knows Bruce was involved, that means that he already knows what happened, she thought. But how? And what must he think of me now? Does he think that I'm still entangled with my ex-boyfriend? Dario didn't answer her question. He turned on the bedside lamp and took out his phone. He opened his email and passed it to Jade. Seeing the photo, she finally understood why he was behaving so differently. A cold shiver ran down her spine. She broke free from his embrace and looked at him with an inscrutable expression. Dario, why do you have this photo? So he knew all along, and that was why he asked. But why didn't he just say it directly? She wondered. Why didn't you tell me the truth? Dario asked. The warm yellow light shone on Jade's delicate face, making her look gentler and more beautiful, and making Dario want to be close to her. He stared at her. She was like a child who had done something wrong. She sat by his side in bed without moving. She bit her lower lip tightly, but didn't dare to tell him the truth. She just kept silent. Dario pulled her over in a domineering manner and stared at her lowered eyes. He frowned and said in a deep voice, Are you afraid that I'll do something to Bruce? Jade immediately looked up in shock and said firmly, Of course not. Dario knew that that wasn't the reason. He'd only asked her to get her to tell the truth. He pulled her hand and wrapped her in his arms, letting her lean against his shoulder. His eyes were filled with love. He softened his tone and said, Are you afraid that I'd misunderstand and that's why you didn't tell me? Were you scared I'd think you weren't worthy of me? Jade's body shook. As always, it was impossible to keep secrets from him. There was nothing that he wouldn't find out. Her eyes turned red with suppressed tears. She turned around and looked at him carefully. Then she hid her head in embarrassment. Dario reached out his hand to cup her cheek and forced her to look into his eyes. Jade bit her lower lip as if she didn't know what to say. In front of him, she had always felt inferior, and now, after the incident with Bruce, she felt that she was even more unworthy of Dario. She hadn't wanted him to know the truth because she hadn't wanted him to misunderstand her. She wanted to maintain the best image possible in front of him. Dario looked at her wet eyelashes and held her in his arms. You should tell me the truth. I want to know all your grievances. Remember, you're my wife. No matter what others say, I'll always believe you over them. Do you understand? He looked at her red eyes with heartache. He kissed her lightly on her eyelashes and all the way from her cheek to her tender lips. Jade angled her neck away, but Dario reached out his hand and tightly held the back of her head, deepening the kiss. Jade didn't reject his advances, but she couldn't fully respond. He kissed her even more fiercely, as if he was claiming her. His overbearing yet incomparably gentle love made Jade feel intoxicated. She was afraid that one day she would be unable to extricate herself from this man's kiss. The two of them kissed so passionately, it was like they were one being. He pressed a finger against her mouth and said gently, I've already told you that the only woman who can stand by my side is you. Are you afraid that I won't believe you? Jade lay under him and shook her head. Dario stretched out his fingers and stroked from her forehead to the back of her ears. His movements were slow and delicate, as if he was handling a precious piece of art, afraid that he would break her. I know what it is. It's not that you're afraid I won't believe you, but that you care too much about what I think, right? Dario said seriously. Jade was stunned. She didn't know what to say. He always knew what she was thinking. She couldn't decide whether she felt lucky or sad that her husband knew her so well. It meant she had to tell him everything because nothing could be hidden from him. She turned her head away as if she didn't want him to see through her and refused to speak. In any case, it would have made no difference. He could guess everything that went through her mind. This is even better. In the future, I won't even need to talk anymore, she thought. Dario knew that she was shy. He smiled and stopped asking her questions. He lay beside her and let her look into his eyes. After a long time, he said to her guiltily, It's all my fault, sweetheart. What? Why would he suddenly say that? She wondered. What could he possibly feel guilty about? Dario reached out his hand to touch her cheek. This was the first time they had simply lain in bed and looked at each other quietly. Sometimes he really wanted time to stop just like that and let them stay there together forever. I should have been with you so that you wouldn't have been injured. Dario's eyes sparkled with unshed tears. She must have felt very helpless, and I wish I had been there to save her, he thought, but he hadn't been by her side. When he realized how he'd let her down, he felt a sharp pain in his heart. If I hadn't gone to New York to be with Evelyn, but instead had gone straight to LA to be with Jade, perhaps it wouldn't have happened, and I wouldn't have given Bruce the chance to harass her, he thought, with great regret. Episode 298, The Wolf. Hearing Dario apologize to her, Jade felt her heartache. She stroked his face. It's not your fault, darling. These problems have nothing to do with you. You weren't there, and I know you would have protected me if you had been. I think I should find the time to learn self-defense or something. That way, if I'm in danger again, I can rely on my own abilities to defeat the bad guys. It was her fault for being defenseless. I've been bullied time and time again. I can't continue like this, she thought. I must learn how to protect myself in order to make Dario feel at ease. What nonsense are you spewing? Let me handle the bad guys. Do you think I can't do it? Dario seemed to be a little angry. It's not that. You're the best in my eyes, but I'm really frustrated that I can't protect myself. Jade frowned. She tried her best, but had only managed to hurt Bruce a little. He had easily thrown her to the ground. Bruce Stevens had come to destroy her and Dario's lives 4 times already. Sooner or later, she would pay him back. Then, do you think I don't have the ability to help you defeat those bad guys? Dario rolled her over and pressed her into the mattress, staring down into her eyes. No, I know you can, Dario. You're the most capable man. She even kissed him shyly on the lips. Dario's mind was in chaos. Every time Jade took the initiative, it made his heart skip a beat. He gently stroked her face and looked at her with loving eyes. Do you know how happy I am to have met you? Dario, who had always been cold and arrogant, had been so affectionate lately. Jade was at a loss for what to do. She stretched out her arm and hung it around his neck. She smiled and said, Meeting you has made me happier than I'd ever believed possible. I do so little for you, but you do everything for me. Dario, I love you. She stared into his eyes. She really felt that meeting him had been the apex of her life. I love you too, Jade. Those 5 simple words melted the softest part of Jade's heart. This was only the second time that he had ever said that he loved her. His eyes were filled with deep affection. Those words, and the knowledge that he trusted her so much, made all her doubts disappear. The fear and pain she had suffered during the day slowly melted into his embrace. As long as he was by her side, Jade felt that it was enough. She happily crawled into his embrace and said in a voice like cotton candy, Dario, do you know that I really hope we'll be together forever? If she could lean into his arms forever and feel his gentleness, she would die without regrets. Dario raised the corner of his lips and whispered in her ear, I hope that I can give you sex and happiness forever. He emphasized the words sex and happiness. Her face instantly turned red to the roots of her hair. I really can't stand him sometimes. Such a romantic atmosphere, and he has to say something like that, she thought. She was so annoyed that she immediately broke free from his embrace. She punched him forcefully in the chest. Dario, you're such a wolf. What are you playing at? Seeing Jade talking to him so boldly, Dario felt a surge of joy. The relationship between them was gradually becoming equal. Only in this way could they truly be together. He caught her slender hand that was beating his chest and placed it on his mouth. He kissed her fingers gently. An electric feeling spread from her fingers all over her body. Maybe it was only Dario who could elicit this response from her. Darling, what do you want to do? He asked. Jade wanted to take back her fingers, but Dario didn't give her a chance. He raised his eyebrows and said righteously, Didn't you say that I'm a wolf? If I don't do anything, how can I live up to the title? I was wrong, okay? I just said it as a joke. A wolf indeed. A good man wouldn't take advantage of the situation. However, Dario didn't plan to let her go. Instead, he pressed her heavily under his body and fiercely bit her lips. He pulled her bottom lip into his mouth and carefully nibbled on it as if he were tasting it. His voice was low and patient. Of course you weren't wrong. And since you know that, you'll suffer the consequences of having a wolf as a husband. The look he gave her made his facetious meaning clear. Jade felt a flutter of arousal and turned her head away without saying anything. The consequences would be something naughty. She waited, but Dario didn't move a muscle. Surprised, she raised her head and found him staring at her with a gentle expression. It made her feel a little embarrassed. Dario, why are you always staring at me? Jade shyly ran her hands through her hair. It seemed like he'd never looked at her quite like that before. I can't help it if you look good. Dario lowered his head and kissed her forehead. He leaned close to her ear and said very wickedly, As for those consequences, you'll have to wait 2 days. Jade tried to work out what was special about 2 days' time. Then, in a sudden flash, she understood. That was when her period would be finished. What was Dario thinking? What did he have in store for her? Hurry up and go to sleep. Good night. You have work to do tomorrow. Dario covered her with the blanket and turned off the bedside lamp. He quietly walked toward the door. Episode 299. Cyber Sleuthing. Jade sat up in bed and asked nervously, "Where are you going?" Because it was dark, she didn't notice the dangerous glint in Dario's eyes. His entire body was tense with hostility. "There are still some things I need to deal with," he said coldly. Jade assumed that he was talking about work, so she didn't reply. She wanted to say something but didn't know how. In the end, she sighed and laid down. Dario had already walked to the door, but he came back over to the bed and whispered into her ear. "What is it? Are you upset because I won't be sleeping beside you?" She couldn't decide if she should nod or shake her head. She wanted him to stay with her but was afraid of delaying his work. Dario could tell what she was thinking at a glance. He held her in his arms and gently rubbed her back, humming a lullaby. It was as if he was coaxing a child to sleep. It was very nice. Jade leaned into his embrace and closed her eyes. Time seemed to have stopped. She had not known that Dario could actually sing. In his comforting arms, she soon fell asleep. In a daze, Dario heard her muttering, "Dario, thank you. Thank you for believing in me so much. I love you." He smiled. His wife was growing to care for him more and more. Dario waited until Jade was completely asleep before carefully placing her flat and covering her with the blanket. Then he walked out barefooted. When he entered the meeting room next door, Lucas was already waiting for him. He immediately began to report on the situation. "I'm sorry, Dario. I haven't found the sender yet. However, I've already followed the IP address and found the sender's address and location. The email was sent from an internet cafe in London. It seemed he had gone there on purpose. A former associate of mine happens to be in England. I've contacted him and asked him to help me investigate, but it'll take some time," Lucas said quickly. Dario frowned. Lucas's hacking skills could be said to be the best in the States, but there was still someone he couldn't find. There was only one possibility, and that was that they were chasing another first-class expert. Clearly, the other party has very good anti-detection skills and deliberately sent it out from London to avoid being traced. Bruce Stevens is a troublemaker, and he has it in for Miss Winslet, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's the person who sent the email, Lucas said. But it was very curious. It was just an email. Why would they go through the trouble of having it sent from another country? Or was the sender British? Lucas felt it was not that simple. Someone must have sent the photo to the British person to have them forward it. In other words, they had accomplices on both sides of the world. He had no idea who this mysterious person was. While Lucas was pondering this, his associate sent him a message saying that he'd found a clue. He immediately opened his email and found out who had sent the photo. Lucas was taken aback. The sender didn't have any connection whatsoever with Jade. He sighed in frustration and rubbed his tired eyes. "Dario, this is a dead end. I think the sender was probably just someone paid to forward the email. I don't think we can find anything more. Whoever is masterminding this, well, I don't think it's about Jade at all. I think they're trying to get at you, and this was just a means to an end." Lucas felt that such an analysis was the most reasonable and the most suitable one for the current situation. Dario sat there quietly and Lucas couldn't see any emotion in his eyes. He said to him, "I think this photo and Mimi's kidnapping in New York could be related. Although I don't have concrete evidence yet, I feel that the possibility that they were orchestrated by the same person is very high." Dario narrowed his eyes. In a low voice he said, "There's no need to check. No need to investigate, what do you mean?" Lucas didn't understand what Dario was thinking. Could it be that he didn't want to know the connection between the two? Or was he already aware of it? "They'll reveal themselves very soon," Dario said with cold certainty, as if he could predict what would happen next. Lucas nodded in acceptance. He knew that Dario rarely needed his help, and he had sharp intuition. There had never been a mistake in his decisions. Nevertheless, Lucas decided he would also continue investigating. Dario turned to Lucas and said seriously, "Jade was at a party at the closest hotel to the movie studio complex at noon today. Find all the surveillance videos from around that time. Remember, don't leave any details out." "Okay, I'll go and check right away." Lucas immediately went to work. 10 minutes later, after making a few calls, he had access to the surveillance footage from the Imperial Hotel, and then he spent some time filtering. The King's Palace cast and crew had started to go into the Imperial Hotel at noon and had stayed until 2 p.m., so he selected those times. When the video files for those hours were ready, he gave them to Dario. Dario picked up the computer and started to check the videos that Lucas had filtered. He skimmed forward quickly. Finally, he found a familiar figure in a corridor outside the hall on the second floor. Episode 300. How did she know him? Dario quickly pressed the pause button and stared intently at the screen. Then, he played the video again. Lucas sensed Dario's anger grow as he watched it. He thought Dario might explode when it showed Bruce dragging Jade away. Jade had looked as if she had stubbornly resisted his invitation and then his threats, but in the end, she had been dragged away by force. After that, Bruce had taken her to a private room. Lucas immediately checked the room number and discovered that Bruce had booked that room for 2 nights. That meant he hadn't wanted anyone to disturb them. It also meant that Bruce had planned to take Jade there from the beginning. Dario was puzzled. Jade was so tiny. How had she been able to escape Bruce's clutches? As he entertained this thought, he suddenly noticed another man in the surveillance video. He appeared to be in the corridor and stopped to listen to the commotion in the private room. Dario and Lucas watched him open the door and go in. Then, they saw him pull Jade from the room. It seemed that he had rescued her. Knowing that Jade was safe and sound, Dario should have been grateful, but his expression had grown even angrier than before. Lucas, sitting next to him, was frowning in confusion. In the video, the man had acted like he knew Jade, but neither he nor Dario had ever seen him. When Dario had first met Jade, he had made Lucas check out anyone associated with her, and this man had not appeared in that search. Could Jade have met him since then? Dario stared at the monitor for a long time and then coolly said, "Keep going." Lucas pressed the play button again and they continued to watch. As the man, who was Clive Carson, pulled Jade from the room, Bruce tried to stop him but was kicked to the ground. The man appeared to threaten Bruce, who was so scared by then that he didn't dare to move. What shocked Dario and Lucas was that in the video, Jade seemed to know him, and apparently, she trusted him enough to leave with him. Dario stared at the screen darkly. Why had Jade left so easily with that man? How did they know each other? He certainly wasn't someone Jade would have met in her own social circle. In the video, they had both clearly seen Bruce lying on the floor with the knife pinning his trousers to the ground right by his crotch. It wasn't the sort of knife that normal people would carry around. Lucas was afraid that something bad would happen if Dario continued to watch. He tried to pause the video, but Dario looked at him coldly and said, "Don't." Lucas let the video play on. At that point in the video, Jade's expression changed. She put some distance between herself and Clive as if she wanted to leave, but then Clive began to harass her. Seeing this, Dario's spirits improved. He realized that Jade had left with the man only to get out of a dangerous situation. It had been her only choice. But as the video continued, Dario began to get angry again. They watched the man take away Jade's phone and appeared to disconnect a call. The timestamp showed that this happened at noon, precisely when Dario had called Jade. He recalled that the first time he had called her, someone had hung up on him. Apparently, it had been him. But why had Jade lied about that? She had said that she had hung up the phone herself. Although Jade had told him the truth about meeting Bruce, she hadn't mentioned the other man. Why was that? Dario glared at the monitor. The video continued and showed Jade going alone to meet the cast, and then they all left together. Dario replayed the section of the video where Clive had typed something on Jade's phone. He pointed and said, "Find out what that was." "Yes, sir," said Lucas. He could not see it clearly on the video as the camera had been too far away. Lucas was finally able to zoom in on Jade's phone and make an educated guess about what had been typed. It was clearly a phone number, and Lucas read out the numbers he thought he could see. Dario brusquely told Lucas, "Find out whose number that is." Dario gave him no further instructions and returned to his bedroom. Lucas, now alone in the meeting room, rubbed his tired eyes. He looked at Dario's back as he left. He seemed really angry this time, and Lucas couldn't figure out exactly why. Dario quietly returned to the bedroom. He didn't turn on the lights. He slipped off his shoes and walked to the bed. Jade was asleep. She hadn't noticed him leave nor come back into the room. She was obviously exhausted. Dario watched her sleeping face and frowned as he thought of the video and of Bruce throwing Jade to the ground. Episode 301. How Superman Spent His Night. When she was with him, he could easily protect her. He could catch Jade if she tripped, stop her from being cold, and make sure no one hurt her. But when she'd been away from his protection, Bruce had dared to touch her. Dario's eyes were murderous. When he reached the bed, he carefully removed the blanket and lifted Jade's nightgown. He kept the lights off, and his movements were very gentle so that he wouldn't wake her. He slowly picked up his phone and shone the light from it on her back. When he saw the large bruise on her delicate skin, his heart hurt. His eyes were filled with horrific guilt. He hadn't protected her well at all. The bruise covered half her back and must have been extremely painful. How could he not have noticed? Jade had never acted as if she was in pain in front of him. She had endured more than he realized. But he wished she wouldn't try to be so strong. He wanted to be able to take care of her. The injury was his fault. He knew that in his heart. Tears filled his eyes as he lowered his head and murmured, "It's all my fault, my darling. I'm sorry. I should have protected you. I swear this will never happen again." After pulling her nightgown back down, he held her in his arms and pulled the blanket up over them both. Jade felt the warmth of his chest and snuggled up against it. A happy smile appeared on her face. Clearly, she was still sleeping. The image of Bruce hurting Jade kept recurring in Dario's mind. He was ready to kill him, but he wanted to do it slowly. He would make him regret hurting her. He wanted him to feel the same kind of pain that he had inflicted on Jade's body. With these thoughts in his head, Dario carefully climbed back out of bed. In the bathroom, he found some ointment that would reduce the pain of her injury. He gently rubbed it on the bruise. The ointment was a little cold and Jade shivered in her sleep. She kept almost waking up, but each time Dario would pause and coax her back to sleep. After applying the ointment, Dario took out the phone that Jade kept in her bag. He quickly entered her password and checked the phone lock. Sure enough, there was a strange number from the previous day. It was the number that Lucas had seen in the video. Her contact list showed that it belonged to Clive Carson. Although he felt a wave of anger, Dario let it pass. He returned the phone to her purse and lay on the bed as if nothing had happened. It was almost dawn, so there was no point in sleeping. He just wrapped his arms around his wife and waited. He'd originally wanted to delete Clive's number, but decided against it when he realized Jade might notice. He wasn't sure how she would have reacted. The next day when Jade woke up, she was surprised at how little the bruise pained her. She assumed that her ability to recover was improving, never guessing that it was because Dario had taken care of her the night before. She rubbed her eyes and yawned. Touching the bed beside her, she discovered that Dario was no longer there. Before she could wonder where he was, he opened the bedroom door. He was carrying a breakfast tray. He smiled tenderly at her, and his eyes were filled with love. "You're up," he said. Jade saw the breakfast he had brought her and felt a little guilty. She wasn't used to sleeping in or to breakfast in bed, but it was nice to have a husband who was willing to get up early and make her breakfast. Meeting Dario was really the best thing to happen to her. Dario set the tray down next to the bed. Jade took the opportunity to crawl behind him and give him a bear hug. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said cheerfully, and greeted him with a good morning kiss. Her luminous eyes glowed with happiness. She looked at the tray and saw that the breakfast that day was especially exquisite. He had put a lot of effort into it. When she glanced at Dario, he looked like he had barely slept. Yet he seemed in a good mood. She gave him a puzzled frown. "This is so sweet, but you didn't have to make me anything special. I would eat anything. I don't know how you get up so early every morning. You're amazing," she said. She knew that she wouldn't be able to do it. It seemed like all he did was go around and make things better for other people. He was like Superman. "But you only sleep for a few hours each night. That can't be healthy," Jade said worriedly. Dario locked eyes with her and then kissed her forehead. He leaned close to her ear and said in a deep voice, "But I sleep 2 times better when you're by my side." He wasn't sure when it happened, but now he really did need her by his side to sleep well. "The press conference isn't scheduled until tonight, but the plane leaves this morning," he continued. "You have time for a quick breakfast before you leave, and then you can take a good nap on the plane." "Okay," Jade said and nodded. Thinking about the press conference, she became agitated. As she ate her breakfast, she began to worry. Episode 302. Don't be angry. Thinking about the press conference was giving Jade a headache. Dario had admitted that the president of the Adele Barracu branch was his sister, but Diane didn't know that her brother and Jade were married. This meant that her new boss didn't know that she was her sister-in-law. So how was she supposed to handle things at the press conference? Jade was too worried to eat her breakfast, and Dario had noticed. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She looked at him carefully and asked, "Dario, are you going to your sister's press conference?" She didn't know if Dario, as Diane's brother, would normally attend such an important event. Dario replied indifferently, "Maybe." "What do you mean, maybe? Are you going or not?" Jade thought in frustration. Then she asked anxiously, "So, will your parents be going?" This was her biggest concern. It sounded like Dario wasn't sure, so maybe his parents weren't sure either. That would mean there was at least a 50% chance that she wouldn't run into them, she reasoned hopefully. She was surprised when Dario nodded his head in response to her question. She lowered the bit of her food she was about to take and asked nervously, "You mean, they will go for sure?" "Yes." "But, well, what am I supposed to do if I meet them?" Jade cried. She knew she would have to meet her in-laws eventually. She and Dario had been married for almost 2 months and had not seen his parents yet. She wasn't sure if she wanted to meet all his relatives at once. What if they didn't like her? What if they didn't approve because she didn't have their social status? Jade looked down helplessly at her hands in her lap. Dario knew what she was thinking. He reached out and gently lifted her chin. He looked at her closely and saw her panicked eyes. He said softly, "Don't worry. Remember, my parents still don't know that we're married." What he meant was that she wouldn't have to do anything at all. Dario got up and quickly walked over and took her in his arms. She was already unsettled, and this made her even more flustered. "Dario, what are you doing?" she gasped in surprise. Her surprise came from the fact that he also seemed nervous. Maybe he wasn't superhuman after all. But why was he upset? He wasn't the one about to meet new in-laws. Dario hugged her tightly and said earnestly, "Darling, don't be angry." "Angry? Why would I be angry?" Jade asked in confusion. "I told you what happened yesterday had nothing to do with you." Jade thought he was still brooding over the events of the previous day. Dario shook his head and said guiltily, "I mean, don't be angry because I didn't take you to see my parents right after we got married." He began to explain that this was the one regret he had had since they had gotten married. He hadn't given her a real wedding, and now she was a member of the foster family but knew nothing about them. He felt that he had let her down. He told her that he wasn't trying to hide her existence, nor was he concerned that his family wouldn't accept her. He was simply afraid that once he brought her into the family, her life would change forever. He wanted her to remain as happy as she'd been, but his identity might cause trouble for her, especially once the Harper family found out. He had just been trying to protect her. Jade was surprised that he felt bad about these things. She didn't blame him at all. From the beginning, they had both known that their marriage had been one of convenience. They had each benefited from it. She hadn't ever expected that they would really fall in love. Jade was about to tell him not to worry, but for some reason, she decided to test him. She lowered her head sadly and pretended to be devastated. When Dario saw this, his heart nearly broke, and he held her even tighter and said, "Darling, this is all my fault. You can punish me however you see fit, but please don't divorce me." When she heard this, she couldn't take it anymore. Her apricot eyes filled with tears, and she was touched. But then Dario suddenly grabbed her hand and forced her to slap him on the side of his handsome face. The crisp sound of the slap echoed in the room. Jade watched as the palm print from her very own hand grew redder. She was startled and pulled back her hand. She was on the verge of tears, her eyes full of pain and shock. Why had he done that? She reached out and tenderly touched his face. Then she pushed him away and cried angrily, "What was that? Are you stupid? Does it hurt?" "It doesn't hurt. I was just making sure you punished me for behaving the way I have," Dario explained miserably. Jade regretted teasing him. With tears in her eyes, she softly kissed the side of his face. Then she kissed him a few more times to make up for her actions. "You're being ridiculous. I'm not angry about any of that. I was just teasing. I didn't know my acting skills were so good," she said wryly. Episode 303. Never Enough. Dario grabbed her hand and gently kissed it. Then he smiled and said, "Your acting skills aren't that good." Jade opened her mouth in surprise. What? She thought. He knew. Dario looked at her guiltily and said, "But I deserve to be hit. If that wasn't enough, you could do it a few more times." This made Jade's heart ache. She caressed his face and kissed him. His eyes filled with joy when he saw her concern. She snuggled into his arms. "Don't say that," she said. "You're the best thing in the world for me. Whatever you do, I believe that it will always be for my benefit. If I'm with you, I don't care about anything else. And you're right, I'm not ready yet. I'm a little scared to meet your parents, but I never want to punish you, no matter what you do," she explained. He said gently, "Oh, darling." Then he impatiently pushed her back onto the bed and kissed her deeply. He continued to kiss her passionately. Jade responded, but his kisses were so urgent and intense that she didn't have time to breathe. She placed her hand on his chest and gently pushed him away to catch her breath. But he only gave her a few seconds to rest. He tried to kiss her again, but this time Jade quickly dodged. She pouted and said, "Hey, haven't you kissed me enough?" He gazed at her with his dark eyes. No, it's not enough. I'll never have enough kisses from you for as long as I live, he told her. Jade's heart overflowed with happiness. Then she stuck out her tongue at him and said, "But if you keep kissing me, our breakfast will get cold." Dario smiled and touched her nose affectionately. "What are you saying? Do you think eating breakfast is more important than eating me?" Jade lowered her eyes and her face turned red. Then in a very soft, teasing voice, she whispered, "How will I have enough strength to eat you if I don't eat breakfast?" Dario felt his entire body get hot. "Oh my God, you've already learned how to play me like a violin, but we don't have time for games. Finish your breakfast quickly and let's get you dressed." After breakfast, Jade looked at Dario nervously and wondered how she could get dressed without him seeing the bruise on her back. He looked back at her and knew exactly what she was worried about. He handed her the clothes she had selected and began to help her take off the robe she was wearing. She clutched the front of her robe and said anxiously, "Dario, I can do it myself. Why don't you go out and wait for me?" Dario said in a low voice, "I'll help you apply some pain relief ointment, but you must tell me about things like this in the future, no matter what. Do you understand?" Jade's heart skipped a beat. How had he known about her injury? As Dario applied the ointment, she recognized the smell from her dreams the night before. Then she understood that this wasn't the first time he had used it. No wonder she had felt so much better that morning. But how had he known? Dario looked up after changing his clothes and saw her staring at him with wide eyes. "Why are you staring at me?" he asked. "Dazzled by my handsome physique?" he joked. Jade looked at him seriously. She asked, "How did you know? Are you psychic?" Dario lifted her chin and kissed her. He told her, "I'm your husband. It's my job to know everything about you. I still have questions to ask about that bruise, but it can wait until you come home." The plane landed in New York later that morning at a private airport. Dario and Jade had disembarked from the plane with their arms around each other. She had assumed that since it was still early, no one would be waiting outside the plane, but of course Violet and Caroline were still at the bottom of the steps, and she blushed when they saw her with Dario. Caroline was now used to it, but Violet was still surprised and a little envious. Although the event was scheduled for that evening, they were there early because there was so much to be done. Adele Barracue's press conference was going to be held at the Stratford Hotel, one of the largest hotels in the city. The enormous lobby was full of video apparatus, lighting equipment, and an extravagantly decorated stage. It was a spectacular scene. Afraid of their relationship being discovered, Dario had not dropped Jade off at the hotel. When they had gotten off the plane, a company car had been waiting to take her to the hotel. She looked at her husband sadly as she climbed into the car. Dario waited until it was out of sight before he looked away. As Jade entered the penthouse of the Stratford Hotel, makeup artists and stylists flocked to welcome her. Her stylist explained that the company had arranged for a runway show and had invited 10 other models. Jade was scheduled to be the grand finale before the start of the press conference. Episode 304. The Mystery Behind the Masked Man. Jade stood trembling in her 4-inch heels. She was panicked because she couldn't even stand in them properly, let alone walk. High heels were not a normal part of her wardrobe unless they were necessary for a film. What if I fall? She was worried. What if Dario's parents are watching? She now wished she hadn't asked Dario if his parents were going to be there. It would be so much easier if she didn't know. The backstage manager told her she had 2 minutes. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath to try and calm her rapidly beating heart. Her knees wobbled, and she wondered if she would even make it on stage. Then someone suddenly grasped her elbow and pulled her upright. Jade was surprised. Standing at her side was a man in a tuxedo wearing an exquisite mask that covered half of his face. The half that was still uncovered was very handsome. Something about him seemed familiar. She looked at him in surprise. You're, she began to say. But the masked man stopped her and put his lips to her ear. He said in a low and bewitching voice, "Why didn't you recognize your own husband?" "Dario, what are you doing here?" she asked. Of course she knew that was her husband. She just couldn't believe that he was there. Hadn't he said he wasn't sure if he would attend? "If I hadn't come, I don't think you would have made it to the podium out there. Besides, I thought you might want some support. How about it? Are you still nervous?" he asked as he carefully touched her hair. He didn't dare to touch her face for fear of messing up her perfect makeup. Then he held her arm securely. His composure was infectious and calmed Jade. "Wait, what? You're going on stage with me?" she asked and looked at him in surprise. People like him didn't do things like that. The lengths he was willing to go to support her left her in awe. Dario seemed to read her thoughts. With a faint smile, he whispered in her ear, "Don't worry, I'm here to help. Just follow me. Besides, part of me has always wanted to be a model. I just didn't want you to have to do this by yourself, especially in those shoes," Dario said, smiling. Dario's words soothed Jade instantly. She didn't know how to express her gratitude to him. She only knew that she was so touched she was about to cry. But at that point, the spotlight was moving in her direction. The MC's voice boomed from the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the new spokesperson of Adele Barracu, Miss Jade Winslet." Her entrance music began to play. Dario calmly led Jade toward the TV cameras. Now that he was by her side, she was able to step forward steadily and confidently. When the audience members nearest the stage saw them both, they began to chatter excitedly. Jade was wearing a sparkling golden dress that fit her perfectly. She looked magical, like a goddess descending to the mortal world. The masked man beside her gave off an air of nobility that made the crowd gasp. He stood straight and tall, while the mask he wore made everyone wonder who this mystery man was. As they stepped toward the podium together, the audience began cheering and applauding. Reporters moved forward quickly to snap pictures and discover who Jade's mysterious escort might be. The moment the masked man appeared, 3 people in the audience knew exactly who he was. Sharon, Donald, and Diane were stunned. Sharon had expected Dario to attend the press conference, but she had never dreamed he might appear on stage. Dario had been arrogant since he was a boy. He'd always considered anything involving the entertainment industry beneath him. So why was he on stage now? Was it because of his sister? That wasn't like him at all. In contrast, Donald barely reacted. His eyes flashed briefly with surprise and then focused on the lovely woman beside Dario. When Diane saw the two of them and recalled Jade's question about possible siblings, her delicate face, which looked so much like Dario's, dawned with understanding. As she tried to discern their true relationship, she saw the ring on Jade's hand. She was shocked when she recognized it. There was no other ring like it because it had been designed by Dario himself. He'd always been a talented designer and had created that ring when he was 10. At the time, Diane had laughed at him and asked him what he was designing a ring for. He had then said that it was the ring he would give to his future wife. Diane recalled laughing again and telling him that such a big diamond ring would be very expensive. She had warned him that he wouldn't be able to use his father's money for such a thing. Dario, although still a child, had given her a confident, arrogant look and had said nothing. Episode 305. Who was he? "Don't worry, I don't need Dad's money. I'll earn my own money, make this ring, and give it to the woman I love the most," Dario had said. He'd been working on the ring's design for many years. Diane had always thought that he had left the design unfinished. She had never expected her brother to actually make it, let alone the ring would already have an owner. With Dario by her side, Jade had stopped feeling nervous. But when she noticed that the 3 people on the guest stage were watching her, she started to panic. She twisted her ankle and almost fell, but Dario noticed and held his arm out to steady her. He did it in such a way that only the most eagle-eyed would have spotted her stumble. He whispered into her ear, "Don't be afraid, Jade. I'm right here with you. Just think of everyone below the stage as radishes." Jade almost laughed out loud at the image that he had conjured up in her mind, and her fear dissipated. Radishes? She thought, thinking of Dario's sister and his mother with faces in the shape and color of radishes. Her strained smile turned into a natural one, and she suddenly looked as if she was enjoying herself. She took a deep breath to steady her nerves. "You can do it, Jade," she thought. "You can do it." Dario led his radiant-looking wife step by step to the platform. There was a relentless flashing of lights as the reporters and members of the audience took a barrage of photos of her. Dario's humor had had the desired effect and had banished Jade's nerves. She smiled confidently but humbly as they walked. Her dress was priceless and was adorned with precious diamonds that made her sparkle. Her new role as the spokesperson for Adele Barracu, as well as her appearance and her attire, made her seem every inch a star, and there were audible gasps as she walked by. The combined cost of everything that she was wearing was staggering, easily reaching into the millions of dollars, and the reporters were already thinking through what headlines they could use. Dario seemed completely at ease and walked with an air of calm confidence. Jade allowed herself to be led by him, and he instinctively knew how to walk and position her in order to make the best possible impression. She trusted him completely and relaxed under his control. Because she believed in him, they moved naturally together as if they'd been on stage many times in front of crowds. The Adele Barracu brand was known to represent nobility, wealth, and style. Jade's graceful movements, led by Dario, seemed like a perfect representation of everything the brand wanted to showcase. The atmosphere in the room seemed like it had been electrically charged since they had walked on stage. Dario looked dashing and almost impossibly handsome, while Jade looked like an elegant star. Either one of them would have dominated the crowd's attention, but together they were almost hypnotic. Everyone present, male and female, seemed to have fallen into a state of infatuation. Some of the guests were making comments in loud voices. "Wow, who is that male model? My God, I've never seen a model with such a good body. Although he's wearing a mask, I just know that he must be very handsome. I think he's wearing a mask because he knows that no one can stand to look at his beauty. If he's that attractive with a mask on, then imagine how good he will look with the mask off. Wait a minute, I need to go backstage to take a look at him. Miss Winslet is so gorgeous. Can you see that ring on her hand? It's so big and beautiful. It's a perfect match for her. Her dress is amazing. It's like it was designed just for her. She looks like an angel that's come to visit the mortals. She's just too beautiful. No wonder Diane Foster chose her as the spokesperson." There was a burst of applause from below the stage, and lights continued to flash as yet more photos were taken. Jade hadn't expected there to be such a huge reaction. "I was so nervous before I came on the stage, but Dario makes me feel like I could do anything," she thought. Sharon noticed the ring on Jade's hand. Although it was the first time that she had seen the finished product, she had seen the design countless times, and she recognized both the ring and its significance. Her son had once said that the ring would be given to her future daughter-in-law. Sharon understood when she saw it that her son had never given up on jewelry design. His father was an expert jewelry designer whose work was famous throughout the world, and his brand was even the favorite of some European aristocrats. Dario had inherited his father's talent, and when he had been 10 years old, the jewelry he designed was on par with his father's. He had given up on designing jewelry at that point, as he knew that it would damage his father's pride too much to have his skills surpassed by his son. Dario had decided to give up the privileges that came with belonging to the wealthy and influential Foster family. He had left New York and had chosen to study alone in Washington at the age of 12. When he had become an adult, he had set himself up in business in Washington and had relied on his own ability and hard work, refusing to accept any help or money from his family. Sharon knew that Dario's current accomplishments had all been achieved through his own hard work and dedication. Even the Milliken Agency was a result of his own painstaking efforts. She didn't know how much hardship he had suffered, but she knew that it had not been easy to start from scratch with no support from his family. Seeing what their son had been able to achieve on his own, Dario's parents were both very satisfied. He exemplified the Foster's family acumen for business and their work ethic. But although his successes were a source of pride for his parents, Dario had already surpassed the achievements of his father when he'd been young, and there were times when it caused his father to feel jealous. Episode 306, A Surprise Appearance. Sharon brought her thoughts back to the present and looked at the stage. The show was already over. The host had already spoken, and the next stage was the signing ceremony. Sharon thought about the ring. Now I know why Dario's attitude towards Evelyn was so cold. That's why he was so direct when he told her that they couldn't be together, she thought. She sighed. Poor Evelyn. She would have been a dutiful and sensible wife for Dario, but Dario has to choose his own wife. And if he's already made his choice, then I have to support him, she thought. Of course, the Harper family will make a fuss, but Dario can't be forced to marry Evelyn. This must be his way of announcing their relationship, she thought. That's the only explanation for Dario, Jade, and the ring to be seen together. Poor Evelyn. She's tried for 20 years to get Dario to love her. Although Sharon rarely went out, she had heard of Jade. She was aware that she had no parents and had made a name for herself as an actress. She looks good, she thought, and any woman that can make my son fall in love must have something special about her. Her thoughts returned to Evelyn. She has liked Dario ever since she was young, and she even put herself in the hospital out of desperation to be with him. Donald, who was sitting beside her, heard her sigh and guessed what she was thinking. He patted the back of her hand and said seriously, Honey, Dario has grown up. Some things should be left for him to decide for himself. Sharon nodded. Yes, you're right, of course, I'll support his decision. I just feel sorry for poor Evelyn. This news will hit her very hard and she's still in the hospital. It will be hard for her, Donald replied, but it will pass. Relationships can't be forced. I know, she said in agreement. Dario was never keen to attend such occasions, and as soon as he had walked off the stage, he was nowhere to be found. It was as if he had never been there at all. Some female guests went backstage to look for him to try and catch a glimpse of the man behind the mask, but they were frustrated to discover that he had left without a trace. To Jade, it felt like he had been a timely savior. The host announced loudly, "Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the signing ceremony. Please welcome Miss Foster and Miss Winslet." Diane walked purposefully onto the stage to murmurs of appreciation from the crowd as she was strikingly beautiful. Her assistant carried a document and placed it on a table that was on the stage and pointed to where Jade was to sign her name. Jade smiled and signed the document. "Congratulations, Miss Winslet. You are now our new spokesperson," Diane announced as she smiled and extended her hand to her. Jade shook hands while the reporters took pictures from below the stage. Diane rarely shook hands with people, and the reporters knew that pictures of two such beautiful women together would be well sought after. When she took Jade's hand, Diane, who was a little taller, lowered her head slightly, touched Jade's ring and said softly, "When did you and Dario meet?" Jade felt her heartbeat quicken and her eyes widened in surprise. "She knows," she thought. "Miss Foster, how did you know?" Jade asked, embarrassed. Diane let go of her hand, smiled and said in an offhand manner, "It's not just me who knows. We all know." As she spoke, she shifted her gaze to the guest stage, where Dario's parents were sitting. "They all know about me and Dario," Jade thought worriedly. She broke out in a cold sweat. Looking over at them, she realized that Dario's parents looked surprisingly young, more like they could be his elder brother and sister. Jade took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. "I don't feel ready to face his parents yet," she thought, feeling flustered. She held the pen in her hand and looked nervously down the stage for Dario, but she couldn't see him. Perhaps he's left already, she thought sadly. With great relief, she saw him walking toward her with his usual aura of self-confidence, but this time, without his mask. There was a palpable sense of expectation as the crowd watched him enter the stage. His chiseled features and deep, dark eyes enchanted the crowd as he moved elegantly toward where Jade was standing. Without his mask, the effect he had on the women present was dramatic. Almost everyone was unaware of who he was, though they could sense that he was someone of importance. Photographers snapped away, trying to get a good picture of the mystery man. One of the reporters recognized Dario and exclaimed, "Heavens, I think he's Dario Foster." The crowd was in an uproar. "No way, he can't be the Foster family's son. My God, he's even better looking than the rumors say. I've never even seen Dario Foster. I heard that he never attends any events and he hardly ever shows his face anywhere. Why is he here today?" Many of the women were acting like they were female fans at a music venue. Only the pressure of their social status ensured that they exercised some self-restraint. Sharon sat calmly on the guest stage. She was used to the effect her son had on people, especially women, and she smiled proudly. Episode 307. Was Dario hiding behind a mask? Donald frowned slightly as Dario walked onto the stage. His son had become the center of attention, and he didn't like it. Why does he have to be so damn handsome? Wherever he goes, all the women just gape at him. I suppose he does have good genes, he thought resignedly. Dario made Donald feel like his own successes and abilities were pushed to the background whenever he was around, and he couldn't help feeling a tinge of resentment toward his son. As Dario walked toward the stage, his parents and his elder sister's eyes followed him closely and then settled on Jade. Jade was already very nervous, but seeing their relentless gaze made her feel even more so. "Why are they all staring at me?" she thought. "I don't feel ready to meet them." Although Dario's presence had caused a lot of commotion, he stood calm and collected as if none of the people were there. He exuded self-confidence. He stood close enough to Jade that they could speak without others overhearing them. She lowered her head slightly and said in a voice soft enough for only him to hear, "I thought you'd left." "How could I bear to leave you alone?" he replied, his words calming her like a magic potion. "He always knows when I'm in danger, and he appears beside me and saves me like a guardian angel," she thought. She felt a surge of warmth and love in her heart. She wanted to rush into his arms and kiss him, but she managed to stop herself. Saying thank you seems so inadequate for everything he does for me, she thought. The people in the crowd seemed to collectively hold their breath, captivated by Dario's handsome face and elegance. Even the host seemed lost for words for a moment before he remembered that he had a job to do and introduced Dario to the audience. Wow, it seems that we have a very distinguished and unexpected visitor. This is Miss Foster's brother, the mysterious Dario Foster, who has come here for the signing ceremony. From the host's comment, the people watching were led to believe that Dario had arrived to support his sister, Diane, rather than Jade. The reporters renewed their attempts to get a good picture of the elusive Mr. Foster, and there were more comments from the crowd. Wow, so he is the Foster's son. No wonder he's so handsome. Look, the one in the guest seat is his father. The two of them are like brothers. Oh my God, the Foster family has good genes. Hey, do you think he could have been the model who came in earlier wearing a mask? He looks so similar. Stop joking around, that's Dario Foster. Why would he pretend to be a model and wear a mask? Anyway, he's much better looking than any model. Okay, let's proceed to the next stage, the host suddenly announced. In order to welcome Miss Winslet properly to the team, Miss Foster has specially prepared a gift for her. The host's announcement surprised everyone, including Diane, who raised her eyebrows in surprise. She had prepared a gift. It was a set of the most expensive and exclusive skincare products from Adele Barracu. The previous spokesperson had also received a gift, so Jade was no exception. But Diane hadn't expected to present the gift there on stage. She frowned. What's the matter with this host? She wondered. Before she could react, the host continued enthusiastically. Okay, would Adele Barracu's biggest shareholder, Mrs. Foster, come to the stage to present the gift to our new spokesperson, Miss Winslet. As the biggest shareholder of Adele Barracu, Sharon had a significant role in the company, but very few people were aware of that. Sharon and Donald were both shocked at the announcement, though they managed to hide their surprise well. Diane looked at her parents quizzically, trying to figure out what was going on, and then her penetrating gaze fell on her brother. What is Dario trying to do? He must have arranged all of this, she thought, as she observed his calm expression. Dario's dark eyes had watched Jade throughout. He had an expression of tenderness, as if she was the only person in his world. Everyone looked at Mrs. Foster expectantly, and she knew that she had no choice but to do as the host had requested, or she would risk spoiling her daughter's signing ceremony. Sharon smiled elegantly, as if she had expected to be called up to the stage, and she stood and walked over with the demeanor of a noble woman. Jade felt an attack of nerves as she walked toward her. What is going on? She wondered. When Caroline talked me through the process this morning, she didn't say anything about being presented with a gift, she thought, and she didn't mention that Dario's mum was the biggest shareholder either. So the boss of the company is Dario's sister, and the biggest shareholder is his mum, she thought worriedly. God, I feel like I'm in a TV series. As Sharon arrived on the stage, a beautiful assistant walked to her side with a silver tray and smiled. Mrs. Foster, this is the gift that CEO Foster prepared. Please open it, she said politely. He wasn't talking about Diane at this moment, but as Dario also had shares in Adele Barracu, calling him CEO Foster wasn't too much of a stretch. On the tray was an ornately decorated box that looked very delicate. Sharon frowned slightly. This box looks familiar, she thought, but perhaps it's just a coincidence. When she opened it, she was stunned by its contents. This is my bracelet, she thought. The bracelet had been passed down through the Foster family for generations from a mother to her daughter-in-law. Sharon had kept it safe ever since her own mother-in-law had passed it down to her. She had even given it to Donald to look after, and she had no idea that it would appear at the signing ceremony that day. Episode 308. All that for a bracelet? The bracelet was a priceless antique with an exquisite design. It was made from pure, bright, transparent jade, and it was perfectly flawless with no cracks at all. When Sharon pulled it out, the crowd below the stage gasped in wonder at its beauty. Jade stared at the piece of jewelry in amazement. There was an intricately detailed dragon carved into the bracelet, which was so lifelike that it looked as if it could come alive at any moment. I thought that the gift would be something produced by Adele Barracu, Jade thought. This bracelet is far too grand to be a present for the new spokesperson. Sharon looked down at the bracelet and understood its significance. She smiled politely but risked a fierce glance at her son, at an angle that she thought no one but him would notice. In response, Dario winked at her and smiled. As she looked into his dark and intelligent eyes, she knew what message he was sending. He came here today to introduce me to my daughter-in-law. she thought. He's used the bracelet so that Jade's position in the family is secure. He's even more cunning than his father. I don't know what kind of sins I've committed to have these two men in my life, she thought. And then she sighed, her expression inscrutable. She knew that Dario had put her in a position where she had to give the bracelet to Jade. If she refused to give it to her, she would embarrass herself and her daughter, get her off to a bad start with her new daughter-in-law, and her son would never forgive her. Dario wanted it to be me who gave it to her, she thought, as she resigned herself to part with the beautiful piece. I wonder how he bribed the host to go along with all of this, Donald thought as he watched the drama unfold. As soon as he had seen the jade bracelet in his wife's hands, he had known what Dario was doing. That brat certainly is shrewd. It's not easy to fool Sharon, Donald thought. As he looked at his son, he felt a mix of emotions. He was angry that he had tricked Sharon, but he also felt admiration for the way he had manipulated the situation so skillfully. That's my son, he thought as he shook his head. He hasn't left any of them a way out. Sharon took Jade's slender wrist in her hand and gently slipped the bracelet on. Jade trembled involuntarily as she felt its coolness against her soft skin. It looks priceless, she thought. Then her mind went blank as she desperately thought, what do I call her? Do I call her Mum, or Sharon, or Mrs. Foster? She looked to Dario for guidance as she started to panic, and he returned an encouraging smile. Thank you, Mrs. Foster, she said with a confidence that she didn't feel. As she spoke, Jade looked at her mother-in-law tentatively to see if she had chosen the right form of address. Sharon paused for a moment and then she smiled kindly. Jade breathed a sigh of relief. She looked down again at the bracelet. It fit her perfectly and she felt like it had been designed just for her. Sharon also looked down at it and said meaningfully, It fits you very well. Thank you. Miss Foster has very good taste, she replied, still thinking that the bracelet was from Diane. Sharon left the stage with a smile on her face while the host announced that it was time to take questions from reporters. The Foster family were very influential and the reporters rarely got the chance to interview them, so there was a scramble to get to them. But Donald and Sharon left without answering any questions. Dario also took the opportunity to leave before any reporter could approach him, and the journalists quickly surrounded Jade. As the new spokesperson of the international brand Adele Barracu, there was a flurry of questions about how she would approach her new role, as well as about the wonderful gift that had been presented to her from the prestigious Foster family. After a lengthy session of fielding questions that had gone on into the evening, Jade was relieved that the day was over. That was even more tiring than a day's filming, she thought. A private car took her to the most luxurious hotel in New York, where Adele Barracu had booked her a presidential suite. Violet helped her to carry her luggage in, and when they entered, she squealed in delight and shouted, Wow, Jade, I'm so jealous of you. This room is amazing, although my room is pretty good too, she added happily. Jade took off her shoes and threw them across the floor as if they were enemies that had tormented her throughout the day. I don't ever want to wear high heels again, she exclaimed. She then flopped onto the bed with a huge sigh of relief at taking the weight off her aching feet. Violet hurriedly rushed forward and began massaging her feet. You must be exhausted, Jade. Let me give you a foot rub, she said. You need to take a break. Actually, that reminds me. Caroline said that now you're a big star, she can apply for you to take some leave from filming. Jade's eyes closed as she allowed her body to relax. I don't even have the energy to speak, she thought, as her mind focused on the heavenly sensation in her feet. Episode 309, A Good Massage. Jade was so tired that she almost fell asleep, but she was surprised as the force on her feet changed. It was stronger than before and felt even better. She moaned in pleasure. When did Violet's massage technique become so good? She wondered. She opened her eyes, expecting to see Violet, but was shocked to find Dario with one knee on the floor, massaging one of her feet with an intent look of concentration on his handsome face. She pulled her feet back in shock and cried out, Dario, what are you doing? Where's Violet? She looked over at the closed door. I didn't hear you come in, she continued. And why did Violet leave without saying anything? She asked. Dario smiled, grabbed her ankles, pulled her back, and then continued to massage her. His touch was like magic, and despite her embarrassment, she felt her body relaxing again. Dario, don't massage me, it's so embarrassing, she protested half-heartedly. She tried again to move her legs away, but he took a firm hold of her ankle and continued. "You're my wife. What's there to be embarrassed about?" he replied as he looked at her sore feet. There was a small blister on the back of each of her heels, and he frowned as he inspected them. He made a mental note to find out which stylist had arranged for her to wear those shoes and to ensure that it didn't happen again. He took out a bottle of ointment from his pocket and applied it gently. "How is it? Does it still hurt?" he asked. The ointment gave her some relief from the pain, though it stung where it touched the blisters. Jade gritted her teeth and said, "It's okay, Dario. You don't need to worry." Dario looked at her with sympathy and said, "It's not okay. Your feet are swollen. Wait here." He went to the bathroom and came back with a bowl of hot water. He pulled up his sleeves, placed her feet in the bowl, and gently washed them. This was not the first time that Dario had done that, but it always made Jade feel shy. He was such a proud person that it seemed wrong somehow to Jade for him to wash her feet. As she watched him caress and clean her feet, she felt an overwhelming sense of appreciation and love for him. She leaned forward and tenderly kissed him on the forehead. "Thank you," she said softly. Dario suddenly looked up and met her eyes. He stood up and gently pushed her down onto the bed. Jade caught the smell of male hormones, and she felt her body temperature rise. He reached out his hand and touched her lips, and then gave a half smile and said in a seductive voice, "So, you think that you can get rid of me easily with just a word of thanks?" As he spoke, he looked at her suggestively and ran his hands upward from her waist. Jade coyly adopted an innocent expression and said, "Then what else do you want?" "I want you, of course," he replied, and slowly lay down on top of her. She could feel his arousal, and she blushed. Before she could react, he kissed her passionately. His movements became more and more vigorous, and Jade's willing response urged him on. Although they had already been close that morning in the bathtub, she was like a drug to him. The more he had her, the more he wanted her. Unexpectedly, he stopped and looked Jade in the eyes. He asked with a concerned expression, "Is it still your time of the month?" She was shocked to be asked so directly and was unsure of what to say. She finally said in a whisper, "We can't tonight, and you know that. Maybe the day after tomorrow." I have to be very direct with him, she thought, urging herself to remember to be braver the next time she needed to tell him. Dario looked at Jade through narrowed eyes. Her face was still red with embarrassment, but he asked with surprising bluntness, "Why does your period take so long?" Jade rolled her eyes at him and replied angrily, "How would I know? It's not something I can control." She had been malnourished as a child, and as a result, her menstrual period was erratic. Sometimes it was early, sometimes it was delayed, but it was always unpredictable. She didn't like to disappoint Dario, but she knew it was unreasonable of him to blame her. Dario sighed helplessly and kissed her on the lips. Then he picked up a towel and dried her feet. Jade looked at him and thought about what had happened at the signing ceremony that day. She thought about how his mother had come up to her to give her the bracelet, and the memory made her heartbeat quicken again. "Dario, your sister told me that your parents know about us. Is that true?" she asked nervously. Episode 310. Bad Shoes. Dario smiled and looked meaningfully at the ring on her finger. "My parents know," he said. Jade was confused. They knew because of the ring she was wearing, but Jade didn't yet know that Dario had designed it as a young boy, so she couldn't have known that his family would recognize it. "So, now that they all know, what should we do? What if they don't like me? Will they be disappointed that we got married without telling them?" she asked. "No," Dario said, as he pinched her playfully on the nose. Dario's confidence was contagious, but she was still anxious. But they only know that we're together. They don't know that we got married. If I'd known earlier, I wouldn't have acted so impulsively. Your parents will think that I'm a bad influence on you," she said. She had never been so nervous before. Even the nerve she had felt when she had first acted in a lead role paled into insignificance compared to how she was feeling at that moment. Dario looked at her and felt charmed by her vulnerability. He held her in his arms and comforted her. "Don't worry, I'm here. They're not monsters. It's not as terrible as you think," he said. "But," she began. "Right. You need to be prepared to meet your in-laws now," Dario said, interrupting her assertively as if she were a child. Sometimes Jade felt that she was like a child to him. She could act innocent and he would guide her. She could act recklessly and he would appear at just the right moment to save her. He accepted her unconditionally, and he pampered and protected her. But the worry in Jade's heart only grew worse. The feeling of inferiority was already deeply embedded in her, and it was a big obstacle to overcome. His parents are clearly very cultured, she thought. They've all been brought up with grand expectations of life. How could someone like me ever be accepted into their world? They'll never agree to me being a part of their family. Jade helplessly shook her head and said in a timid voice, I'm just not ready yet. Dario is so outstanding in every way. Everywhere we go, women fall all over themselves just at the sight of him, even if he's wearing a mask, she thought. But I'm just a simple actress. I can never compare to him. Dario saw the sadness and worry in her eyes. He positioned her body gently so that she was lying flat on the bed. Jade was shocked and thought that he wanted to have sex, but he began rubbing her shoulders and said in a commanding tone, Don't move. I'll give you a massage. Just relax. I'll take you for a nice meal later. You've had a busy day and you need to unwind. Jade smiled as she felt Dario's familiar massage technique. How do you seem to know everything? She asked. Although the Adelaborough Q Company had prepared a sumptuous meal for her the night before, she hadn't had much of an appetite then, and she had only eaten a little. Now that she had rested for a while, she felt very hungry. When it was almost 8 o'clock, Dario kissed her on the cheek and left the room. He returned a little while later with a pair of soft, flat shoes for her to wear. Jade slipped them on. They fitted perfectly and were very comfortable. Where are my high heels? She asked. I threw them away, Dario replied. What? You threw them away? They were very expensive, Jade exclaimed. They may have been uncomfortable, but they were designer shoes. I bought them for today's signing ceremony. They cost me nearly $1,000, but Dario has just thrown them away like they were nothing just because they hurt my feet, she thought. It doesn't matter how expensive they were. They're not worth as much as your feet. Anyway, anything that injures you isn't good, so they aren't good shoes, he explained. He spoke very seriously, and Jade's anger disappeared when she realized that he was just trying to look after her. He walked over to her, handed her a pair of sunglasses, and to Jade's surprise, scooped her up in his arms and carried her out of the room. They went down the stairs and out of the hotel, where a black Pagani sports car was waiting for them. This car must be worth a fortune, she thought, but she decided not to ask how much it cost. As she got in, she was surprised to see that David was in the driver's seat rather than Lucas. Hello, David, she said pleasantly. Are you driving? David ran his fingers through his hair in a gesture that he thought was charming and then smiled at her. Yes, I'm bored tonight, so I thought I'd come out and have some fun. The car was a limited edition model and it was worth well over $2 million. Dario was a collector of luxury cars and the Pagani was one of them. David also loved cars, so he'd volunteered to drive his friends to try it out. Dario got in the back and Jade looked at him, confused that he would have his David act as their driver. Are you sure you want to drive us? Dario asked him. It's okay. It's my honor to be Mr. Foster and Miss Winslet's driver, David said good-naturedly. Jade ran her hands appreciatively along the leather upholstery, noticing how luxurious it was. Is this your car? She asked curiously. I wish it was my car, thought David. He was just about to say that it belonged to Dario when Dario caught his eye and gave him a meaningful look. David took the prompt and replied, Yes, this beauty is mine. He smiled secretly in the knowledge that he intended to borrow the car for a few weeks after the evening's outing. Jade sat contentedly and looked out the window as they drove. Jade looked back over Manhattan with its skyscrapers and the bright lights set against the night sky, and she thought how beautiful it was. Dario, where are we going to eat? I've been to New York a few times, but I've never been to a restaurant outside the city, she said. She hadn't been eating much, as she'd been trying hard to maintain her figure, and she was feeling ravenous at the thought of a nice meal. David overheard Jade's comment and frowned in confusion. What? We're not going to a restaurant, he said. Jade looked puzzled. If we're not going to a restaurant, then where are we going? She asked.